We're here in Glasgow to cover COP26. We are COPTV.
Hi, I'm Finlay and you're watching COPTV.
Hi, we're COPTV and today is our third day broadcasting from the New York Times Climate Hub in Glasgow. Today we're going to be focusing on activism.
Activism is very important in the fight for climate change, and it has been throughout the world. Well, here in Glasgow it's no different, and it's been great to see activists come from all over to work together for a better future. This is what's been like in the streets of Glasgow over the past couple of days.
So today we're joined with Dr. Kat Jones from Stop Climate Chaos. So could you explain to the audience a bit about the organisation, please?
Yeah, so Stop Climate Chaos Scotland is a coalition of organisations across civil society. So it's from your NGOs, charities, community groups. There's youth organisations in there, like some student unions, and also trade unions and faith groups. And we've been campaigning together on climate change for about 13 years. And so this is a big moment for us, obviously, being in Glasgow and being on our home turf.
Yeah. So does protesting affect the way world leaders and negotiators handle climate issues?
I suppose we can only hope so. I mean, you've seen the strength of feeling on the streets. I mean, if you saw some great images there of the march and the other things that have been going on. I mean, the estimate, I think, was 120,000 people came out in the streets, and you saw the kind of feelings of kind of hope, but also the feelings of anger, I think, from people to say, like, things are not moving fast enough. And I think you can't help but be moved by that. But my experience of being inside a COP is that you're in a bubble, and it's very, very hard to see what's going on outside. And you know, the people I know who are in COP were not out on the march because they had meetings, because they had talks to go to. And I would think that we need to hope that people are connected with what's happening outside, because it is amazing.
Yeah. In what way does wildlife activism coincide with climate action?
Well, that's a really good question to ask me, because I was in conservation before I joined kind of SCCS and working in climate. And I think that what we're looking at the moment is a nature and a climate emergency. So it's not just about climate, it's also nature, because nature is affected by climate change, obviously. Especially we see in Scotland wildlife moving up the mountains, and you know, wildlife from the south sort of moving north if they can. But also because nature helps protect us against climate change, with trees cooling down cities, with, you know, trees absorbing greenhouse gases. And of course, if you're cutting down forests, that emits carbon, as does peat extraction and other things that damage nature.
Mm-hmm. So how can young activists become involved in the preservation of bird or plant species?
So I mean, I have to say that young people have been probably the most important thing that has brought climate to the forefront of what everyone's talking about at the moment. I mean, if you think about the youth strikes, the way that the young are not taking no for an answer, they're not saying, well, actually, if people, the grown-ups, the kind of experts in the room are saying, well, that's not possible, we can't do that. Young people are not taking that for an answer, they're saying, no, that is possible. So I would say that young people are already really involved in it. And I'd say we need, us sort of older activists who've been in it for a while, need to make more space for young people, I think, in decision-making processes, in like committees and boards, and the makeup of organisations as well.
Yeah, so obviously there has been a lot of protests happening throughout Glasgow. Just today there was people at Santander, the bank in Glasgow, spray painting, which can be seen as a quite extreme form of protesting. Do you think these extreme ways work and catch the media's attention as in a positive or negative light? And is it better to be more peaceful, or are these extreme ways better and more eye-grabbing?
So I have to say that, you know, there's different ways that all struggles have been fought. So, you know, you've got people who are peaceful protesters, or you've got people who are civil activists, civil disobedient. Like if you look at the suffragette movement, of course, they did civil disobedience, and that's how they got the attention. And nobody thought that the women would get the vote, and because of what they did, we did. So I have to say my personal sort of approach is not so much to do it myself, but I totally respect those people who are doing it. And I think, you know, right across the movement, we need to kind of not necessarily divide the movement and go, oh, they're doing it well or they're doing it badly. We need to kind of say, do you know, there's all sorts of tactics people are using, and it is a climate emergency and people need to treat it as such. And I think that what you're seeing in COP is that people are just saying the same old thing, and they're not seeing the utter, you know, emergency of this situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. We'll be back in a moment for more questions, but first we're going to be going back over to Stella and Meredith with the daily rundown.
By the end of this week, there will be decisions made, and overnight there was a draft of the COP26 negotiation outcome released. In this, calls for stronger 2030 greenhouse gas emission target by the end of 2022, and for all countries to increase their short-term commitments by the end of next year.
Currently, activists from Extinction Rebellion are hosting a 24-hour protest outside JP Morgan's Glasgow branch.
In a press release from Oxfam International, it found that the richest 1% carbon emissions are set to be around 30 times the 1.5 degrees limit by 2030, regardless of what the rest of the world does.
The UK's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has returned to COP26. PM Johnson has decided to travel back to Glasgow on the train after people criticised him for flying back to London on a private jet. He is hoping to check on the progress of the agreement. Boris Johnson said, "We need to pull out all the stops if we're going to keep 1.5 degrees warming within our grasp."
Last night, climate activists projected images onto the COP26 venue, calling it greenwashing and demanding fossil fuels be left in the ground.
So we just saw there that the COP26 draft agreement has been released, and they've said in order to make an actual change we need to hit tougher targets. What do you make of this?
So I suppose it's a disappointment. I mean, it's a huge disappointment after all of the efforts that have gone to with civil society. I mean, they absolutely have to ramp it up. We cannot allow the projections which are at kind of 2.4 or more degrees of warming, which would come from this agreement. I mean, it's not an acceptable agreement to have. So my reflection is they need to do a lot more work between now and Friday or Saturday or Sunday or whenever they finish. I mean, this can't stand, was what I would say.
Yeah. And what do you make of some of the agreements that have already been made? So you did talk about deforestation a wee bit before, and they've said that they're going to cut all deforestation and start reversing it by 2030. Is this enough? Are these good agreements being made, or does more need to happen?
So I'm not coming at this from an expert on forest conservation. However, my sister is an expert on forest conservation, and what she would say is that a lot of these sort of agreements are actually agreements that have been made before, but she would say that this is perhaps a bit more positive than we've seen in the past. There's a bit more mechanism how we get there, but I mean, it's absolutely essential that more funding goes into forest conservation. We need to compensate people who are using these forests for their own use. We need to acknowledge the impacts on people. We need to put human rights right at the front. So there's a lot of things that need to go with that kind of agreement, and these big picture stuff and people making these pontifications need to be followed up by real action and real money.
And, well, talking about money, the bank JP Morgan has recently come under heavy fire for being one of the biggest banks to fund fossil fuels. And we've chatted to their protesters. They're based outside our production area, and they're very adamant. They kind of outside their bank. And will their protesting force change in these banks? Will they listen?
I think they will, because I mean, these banks care about what people think, because people have to invest their money in it for that to be invested into fossil fuels, and they won't get that if public opinion turns. And I think that really the writing's on the wall. I mean, so many people have said, you know, fossil fuels is a dying industry, people need to invest in other things. I think if anyone's dragging their feet like that, they need to be shown up for who they are, and they need to start switching their investments.
And is it too late? It's a very simple question, but like, have these banks, have they been doing too much damage? Is it reversible? Can it be fixed?
It can always be better than the alternative. You know, you can always make it better, because the alternative would be even more warming, which of course is even more catastrophic. There's never a stage at which it's not worth taking action. And I think the best time to take action is obviously a decade ago or even more, but the second best time would be today. And then, you know, you just have to keep fighting for change.
And are you optimistic about this week at COP? What do you expect to come from it?
Well, my optimism lies in what's happening outside of COP. So, I mean, if anybody's spent time inside the Blue Zone and also outside in the civil society spaces, you will see a huge contrast. So, COP itself, it's very uncreative. Everything that's happening is a panel discussion, or perhaps an evening reception. Whereas outside, there's workshops, there's creativity, there's amazing arts and culture going on, discussions from people across the world, really discussing what is the best way to live, what is the future that we have, and actually coming up with real solutions to problems from a community scale. And I would encourage anyone who's in the Blue Zone to get out of there and spend all of their time out in the civil society areas, because that's where they'll find the inspiration, the answers, the way forward, and the hope. I don't really see a massive amount of hope inside the official spaces.
So I've got another quick question I'd like to add, if that's all right. So obviously there's a lot of people coming to Glasgow for COP, and it can be really expensive with the room prices going up. So personally, we know you've been hosting some activists, so how has it been hosting them during COP?
Oh, it's been fantastic. So, I mean, I've been really, really busy, but they've been very self-sufficient. They've made their own way into town, and you know, they're pretty good, like looking after themselves, which they'd have to be, because I've been kind of leaving very early and getting back very late. But what has been wonderful is like having dinner together one night when I did have time to have dinner with them. We did a bit of a dance. They said, they don't speak. One of them speaks really good English. One of them doesn't speak such good English. But he suggested that they do their special dance from Madagascar. He danced around the room, we all followed, and then we taught him some Scottish dances. So, I mean, it's just been amazing, and also learning what they're doing in COP, which is so important, and listening to what it's like to be a person from the Global South trying to make a difference in that space, and the challenges they face.
Yeah. Well, it's been really great having you, and I want to say thank you, because I hope that you've, like a lot of other people, have got to learn a lot more about what's going on in COP and other people's experiences with it. So, but coming up next on COPTV, we have Finlay and his travels to Allendale to help us learn more about Rewilding. We have music from Post-Cold Prom Queen, and an interview with Charlie Adler, the artist behind The Walking Dead.
One aspect of carbon emissions that people don't talk about is military emissions. Our team went to the People's Summit to speak to activists on this issue.
Have you ever heard of a military carbon footprint? No, probably not. No single country includes military carbon in their reports, and they're not required to regulate or reduce their emissions. Military emissions as a whole are a major contributor to climate change, and militaries historically lack renewable resources in their operations and tend to focus on aggressive solutions that don't solve the problem. So how does this affect our view of the climate crisis? We're here today at the COP26 Coalition People Summit to find out.
Without the military, there would be not the climate change problems that we're dealing with. It is the military that holds safety for corporations. It doesn't make people safe. It makes corporations safe to extract, oppress, and destroy.
Well, I think we have to recognise that the military is one of the largest institutional emitters of carbon dioxide, so you cannot tackle climate change unless they're included. They also prop up the whole system of oil and fossil fuel extraction. and the resource extraction that has created the climate crisis. So they're directly responsible and they're indirectly responsible because they are part of the whole system that has created this crisis. So we can't tackle it without tackling the military.
Well, they've been very effective at keeping it a secret and hiding it. And now kind of the cat's out of the bag, and that's happened in just a very few short years.
I was involved in the COP back in 2009 in Copenhagen, where this was not discussed at all. 2015, some people started talking about it, but there was no popular movement. So the first thing is we need data. We need to know actually how much of the problem they are. And then we need to start to say, well, if you are committed to 1.5 degrees, what does that mean for the military? And what we find is that means actually a reduction of the size of the military. Because what we're seeing is not only are they contributing to the crisis, their constant expansion is creating the crisis, and they're also diverting money.
And so I think right now what we're doing is trying to build a movement that won't let that silence be allowed anymore. And because when you're talking about everything that's happening under the tent of the blue zone, if you don't end war and militarism, it doesn't matter. And if you end war and militarism, you will end their polluting ways also. You will end their emissions also. So much of the destruction of the planet is held in place by the military. This very minute, they are destroying pristine ecosystems in all the islands around China that include affecting all these indigenous people. And we heard really horrible stories on the panel today about how militarism is killing people. And you know, how do we move this from a climate change conversation to a systems change conversation? Because if we could talk about the systems change conversation, climate change would be dealt with.
There is no nationalistic, militaristic solution to climate change. We know that. They're part of the problem. So we need to find a more collective, peaceful, collaborative way to work together and to move forward. I think we should care about the military because they're really at the heart of the system.
To stop a nuclear winter, which means the end of life on Earth, it is the existential threat. We must expose the military for what it's doing and stop war.
Well, I would have never expected that. Were you surprised?
I was, you know, I mean, it was something I'd never ever considered before to do with emissions, and there were so many people there who were so passionate about this issue. I mean, they were absolutely just shouting for it. I mean, they really, really care, and it's just so surprising to me that we've never really heard about it before. But, well, Cooking with Rachel is back, and tonight she's making stir fry. I do hope it's better than yesterday.
I'm Rachel, this is Casey, and today's our second day of trying to create some vegetarian dishes.
Today we're making broccoli and chickpea stir fry with rice.
Jumping right into it, you're going to get 1 broccoli, 2 onions and a few garlic cloves, and you're going to chop all of that up. Maybe try not crying. Next, you're going to have a quick coffee break, as you do. And then you're going to leave your vegetables off to the side. Next, you're going to get a pan on a high heat and you're going to add some oil. You're going to take the vegetables you've just cut and then you're going to place your onions into the pan. Stir these until caramelized. Next, you're going to add some warm water into a cup with some vegetable broth. Then you're going to add your broccoli into your pan as well as the vegetable broth. Feel free to add some spices. We've added 2 tablespoons of paprika and some pepper. Moving on to the sauce, you're going to add 120 milliliters of water, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup and 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. You're also going to add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch and you're going to whisk it all together. Once whisked, add it to your pan as well as your chickpeas. Then stir. For a side, we've decided to add some rice. So add as much as you'd like. have a quick coffee break while you wait. And then, ta-da! It's ready. Your quick and easy broccoli stir fry. Enjoy!
Wow, Rachel, that actually looked really good. How was it cooking vegan recipes?
It was actually a lot easier than what most people expect. A lot of people think it's like, oh, you have to put lots of substitutes in for meat, when it's actually really easy.
I mean, my question is, did you even cook that? It looked like it was mostly your friend.
Okay, Casey, I made the sauce. That was a lot of pouring.
Well, I mean, you could do better next time. Now, we all like comics and they make great movies, but they're not often called important. But Charlie Adlard, the artist behind The Walking Dead, has brought together a host of celebrities such as Ricky Gervais, Taika Waititi, Leonardo DiCaprio and Cara Delevingne to put together the most important comic book in the world.
Could you both introduce yourself and just give a brief explanation of your involvement in the book?
I'm a comic book artist, and I'm probably most well known for drawing The Walking Dead for the last 16 years. And I met Paul a couple of years ago at Comic Salopia, and he graciously invited me to join him on this epic journey we've been on together for this comic book that we've created. So I'm just basically one of the collaborators.
I think Charlie's being very, very modest. Amongst other things, Charlie's an absolute force of nature, both in comics and in environmentalism. So alongside actually being a contributor, he also helped bring in some of the best and the biggest comic writers and artists on the planet. So he was absolutely essential. Anyway, my name's Paul Goodenough. I'm the founder of Rewilding Extinction. And you were saying about the comic book, which is the most important comic book on Earth. And what we've done collectively is about 300 of us from all over the planet have got together to basically make comic stories to save animals from extinction.
Why did you choose comics?
You may be able to tell from my background, I'm a bit of a comics fan, but also comics, and Charlie can talk far more eloquently than me about this, but comics aren't constrained by time and space. They can go to places and they can also let people read at their own speed. So unlike film, where you're basically locked into the speed of the director or the editor who's showing you a story, in comics, you can really dig in, you can spend ages, you can really intrinsically just get into that panel. But aside from comics being the best storytelling medium on the planet, in my opinion, also what they do is, by their very definition, they take really, really big concepts, really big things, and they simplify them right down. And let's face it, given all the facts, the figures, and all the science behind climate change and environmentalism, that's exactly what we need to make it easy for people to understand, which is what I think is perfect.
Yeah, comics can be a very direct medium. It's probably more direct than, like Paul said, than film, where you are locked in for a certain amount of time and that's it. Probably more direct than prose, because visually you communicate really much quicker initially than you could in the written word. So yeah, that's why I love comics too, and that's why I became part of this industry.
Could you explain what your hopes are in publishing the book? Are you hopeful that it will bring change?
I don't know if you know, but there's 7 projects that will basically, the money from the book will sponsor. The first of which is with Greenpeace, to change some of the laws and business practices. There's some ridiculous things out there that are just driving species to extinction. And what Greenpeace will do is they'll work either with, or they'll bring pressure and challenges on governments and businesses to change. That's one bit. The second bit is we're actually buying land for Indigenous people all over the planet, because that land, if it goes, we're all in trouble. So that's what we hope to do.
What would you say was your inspiration for the project? Like, can you describe that moment when it all made sense?
Yeah, actually I can, really easily. There's one of my artists I've worked with a lot and a friend of mine, Jenny Ginya. She makes lots of comics about animals. And there's one in particular called Little Mo. And what Little Mo is a very simple, but in the simplicity, it's a beautiful comic. What it does is basically, it talks about, it shows you a mother albatross, and what she's trying to do is feed her chick, and all she can find is plastic. And this albatross is feeding her chick plastic, and she doesn't understand why her chick is getting sick. But she keeps trying to find more, and she keeps bringing back more plastic for the chick. And it broke my heart, Joseph. It literally broke my heart. More than me seeing these big figures of like, there's a billion creatures dying every day from sea waste, more than any of the TV shows, more than the straw up the turtle's nose, that got me. And that's when I thought, this is the way.
I don't know why, but you can get the message across so much better than dry facts and figures.
What would you say to people who read the book and do feel inspired and want to make change? What sort of would be the next step?
Firstly, if they can follow Rewriting Extinction, that's the easiest thing. And what we do on there is we give people simple, lazy, easy ways to help. And that can be as simple as, please sign this petition. Please tell your friends. Or just like, for example, really interesting, but actually often misunderstood fact is, if you clean your oven hobs, you'll actually massively take down your electricity bill and therefore save lots of carbon. Really super stuff. Leaving your grass growing for a little bit longer, then you have clover. That then means that bees have more space to actually live and flourish. So there's many things we can, if people can donate, then what we do is 100% of that money will go to save species, buy land, and actually change the planet. If they can't donate, they can also share the messages or take individual actions. And we'll always be sharing simple ways that people can do that, and just really making it as clear how tangibly the things that someone does makes a difference.
Are you hopeful that that vital changes will be made at COP26 then?
Yeah, it's too much of a cliche. It's guys like you that are really sort of are doing really good things and making a change, because it's at the end of the day, it's going to have to be the next generation that are going to face all this. So you guys have really got to, unfortunately, step up to the bat and get rid of us oldies, and hopefully the next generation will have a lot more sensible view of all this.
Today on Out of the Blue, I'm here with Alicia and Diana from the YMCA to hear about their experiences. So guys, welcome. How are you?
Good, yeah. Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I'll just start off with what your experience of the Blue Zone has been like so far. I mean, can you sum it up for us?
So I suppose I've never been to a COP before. It's my first COP. I was at the United Nations General Assembly in 2019. It's a bit different, like even compared to to UNGA. Obviously, a lot more civil society, a lot more observers of NGOs and groups like YMCA, and a lot more young people. I was part of an action today. My hands are covered in marker. And it was just really powerful just to sit with lots of activists from around the world, and to be, just outside the rooms of world leaders or whatever. So I suppose it's been powerful to have that at least in the space, but still inaccessibility is definitely still an issue. I think we've spoken about this. Yeah, something you've experienced as well, right?
Yeah. So this is also my first COP, and really, I tried my best to prepare myself, looking online to see what to expect as I enter the Blue Zone, and it's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Alicia was talking about the inaccessibility, and really just actually as an observer status, we were given this observer status as part of the YMCA delegation in order to observe what is going on. And really, what we're really seeing is that there's not much transparency in the way that these negotiations happen from our perspectives. A lot of these negotiations use very specific jargon that if you don't have the background, if you could not take the time to understand what the reports they're referring to, then really it's as if you're not even in the room. And so that's somewhat of the experience we have. We really hope that it would be a way for us to be a part of the conversation, but really it's kind of not the case.
I mean, how do you feel like your background has impacted your experience at COP? I mean, has it really made a difference to what you would have thought it would have been?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the island of Saipan, which is a Pacific island, and currently I live in Hawaii. And so here at COP, there are only 4 Pacific Island nations represented. 4 Pacific Island nations. And we have all this talk about going below 2 degrees Celsius, right, 1.5. But really, 2 degrees Celsius means the destruction of Pacific Island nations, right? And so we all have all these big solutions, but then we talk about who's there, right? But really, who's not there? The silence is so loud. The people that are not the Pacific Island nations, the indigenous peoples, their voices are just not in the room. And so how can we find and talk about these solutions when not everyone is on board and we're leaving people behind? So that's just a little bit about like how I feel about, from my experience, from my background as part of the Pacific Islands. I just feel not just unheard, but not understood.
Yeah, and like I'd echo that, and that would be what I've seen. And it's been great to meet Diana and others from Peru and Uruguay and Ghana and all these places, and just to hear their stories and hear about what people at the front line of this issue, because we're always hearing people like Boris Johnson and all these people talk about it as if they know about it, but let me tell you, they don't have a clue about what climate change is. It's people like this, it's people like Diana who know what's actually going on because they're suffering, and people are literally dying. And I made an effort last week to go to a lot of the Indigenous people's talks, a lot of people from MAPA communities, because I just felt like, number one, I could understand barely anything else, even though I'm a law student, and number two, I was never going to be able to access that sort of that sort of setting anywhere else. You're not going to find information, that real information about what's happening really on the ground with climate change anywhere else. I mean, if I wanted to learn about climate finance, I probably could do some sort of thing online about it, right? But I just thought it was a great opportunity. So, I mean, I'd just say I'd encourage people, if they're here, to do that as much as possible and talk to people as much as possible, because you're not going to really get that opportunity anywhere else. And I think although there's, lack of representation, the one good thing is at least we have some sort of platform to meet and discuss and hopefully alleviate and rid and improve that issue.
So why did you both get involved in climate action? What kind of drew you into feeling so passionately that you would take up a position as a delegate with the YMCA?
So I hate the word activist, but I've been an activist since I was 8. I grew up in rural Ireland, way down south, like very bottom. And it wasn't about climate change. It wasn't about like saving the turtles or not using plastic straws. It was just about looking after your community, my small little 100-student school. And then as I got older and got involved with like youth empowerment and youth participation in Ireland, and then when I started to learn about climate change, like my first time learning about climate change was through the YMCA. Learning about the Sustainable Development Goals was all through the YMCA. And it really just angered me because I had I just grew up caring about something, and to learn that people are deliberately ruining something and hurting people and then profiting off it, it made me want to be involved, and why wouldn't it,
Yeah, so I guess my story of how I got involved was when I was a junior, a third year in high school, I was doing this research project studying the coral reefs in my island of Saipan. And I fell in love with the coral reefs. I spent a year working on them, monitoring them, and then a year later, I went to visit them again, hoping to see the colorful reefs that housed this amazing marine system that was found in my waters in Saipan. And when I got there, all I saw was white because a major bleaching event killed the reefs that I learn to love. And so when I went to college, I pursued a degree in global environmental science in Hawaii, and I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to understand why the world is the way it is. Why am I losing the reefs that I love? And through that process, I learned more about just the reefs. I learned about what was happening on the land, what was happening to the people. And so really through my education and through my time in Hawaii, it really helped shape who I wanted to be as a scientist, and how to be a communicator in that way. And so just when my time with interacting with indigenous peoples, it really helped challenge how I view myself as a scientist. You know, when you're thinking of a scientist, you have to be objective, you have to follow how they teach you the scientific process. But really, when I'm working with indigenous peoples, the Kanaka Maoli, the Native Hawaiians, there shouldn't be objectivity when you're caring for the land, you know? It has to be man with nature versus man versus nature. And I think that's something that I was taught in the institutions that I grew up in, and something that I'm still in the process of unlearning, you know, of my relationship with the environment and trying to live with it rather than against it.
Yeah, so just kind of leading on from the points that you guys have made there, I mean, how can young people really get involved? Is there a barrier to it? And I mean, how can we improve that in the future?
Oh, we're being very negative, aren't we? It's gone very sad in here all of a sudden. Look, there's loads of barriers to everything, right? No matter what age you are, I suppose particularly in this conversation it's difficult because, like we said, the jargon, the money, even when you look at COP in general, it's pretty inaccessible in a normal year, and then you add COVID and you add vaccine inequality and you get even more. So for young people, I don't think you have to be an activist, I don't think you have to be Greta Thunberg, but I think if your interests lie in the arts, in music, science, STEM, coding, whatever the hell it is, there's a way for you to use that to improve the world in some shape or form. I don't think you have to be sitting here doing this, but there's loads of ways you can do that, and just find a group of people who have the same interests as you, and that's the way I did it.
Yeah.
I would love to echo that, you know, like we're always talking about the doom and gloom, but what's next? And so really, young people is what next. So we're here because we have been involved as youth leaders, and we have done work in our communities to address the issues that we care about in our communities. So really, what's important that we need to have for young people is a platform, you know, a space for us to do what we want to do, and really having platforms like the YMCA or having the platforms to the events that we have throughout COP outside the Blue Zone really helps have spaces for these conversations to take place and to inspire people to go forward and do what they want, you know. And so really seeing leaders, you know, not in suits in the Blue Zone, but leaders that look like us, that talk like us, really is what we need to see more of, and we need to see more coverage of, and that will help, I hope, will help inspire more people to do what they can in this issue that will affect all of us and the future that we will inevitably inherit.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us today, guys. It's been absolutely amazing to hear your perspectives. I mean, from such different backgrounds, but I mean, you see so many common issues, and it's just really great. I mean, as a young person myself, to hear what you guys have seen and done and will continue to do. But yeah, so for now, we've heard from delegates. Now let's hear from musical activists post-Cold Prom Queen.
We are Lily and Gordon. We are post-Cold Prom Queen. We are electronic pop band, but we cross some other genres as well.
It's pop in a very loose sense.
My bed sheets like I
It's like a lot of our songs deal with anxiety and like the anxiety of living in the modern world, but being the age that we are, we've never lived really in a world that wasn't plagued by huge problems. We both grew up in a post 9/11 world, so yeah, we're nostalgic for a world that never really existed, or if it did, it was only for a very short amount of time before people realized how bad things were.
How would you describe your message that you're putting out there yourselves? Like personally, how would you kind of define it and explain it to the audience?
Anyone who's a musician and anyone who's got any kind of platform whatsoever kind of has a moral obligation to use it to convey a sort of meaningful message. Don't trust corporations, don't trust politicians, do better.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to answer because also we never thought of it as, well, I haven't actually thought of it until now you've posed this question, as a unified message that we are putting forward. I think of it on a song by song basis. But looking at if you connect all the songs together, like Gordon said, it is about looking ahead to a better future and what we can do to make that happen rather than just experiencing it passively.
What are your hopes for COP26?
My hope for COP is that something meaningful comes from it, but it would be the first time that has ever happened. And every time one of these summits comes up, they say, you know, we are only a couple of years away from the tipping point, you know, we've hit peak oil, you know, we don't have any time left. And everybody goes, yes, you're absolutely right, this is a disgrace. And then they go back to their own countries and they still take money from oil companies. They'll still push through legislation that's a watered down version of whatever was agreed in COP. Scotland's doing well. I believe Scotland's on a good path, but the UK as a whole is doing fairly miserably in terms of climate policy.
So the optimistic part is to say it's good they're doing this because as you were saying earlier, like individual actions are a small proportion of everything than actions on an industry, governmental, corporation level. This is at that level, so this is what we're wanting to happen. So optimistically, at least something's maybe happening there, and then pessimistically, it's a show.
I feel that this is all going to become a lot more real and a lot more pressing within our lifetimes. And sorry, Zoe, but especially yours. It's getting scarier because people want to think that they're comfortable. People want to think that they're safe. You know, people will always gravitate towards that if they can. Who can blame them? What they should do is start an electro pop band about it and write some tunes.
Do it.
Do you know, that's got me thinking that maybe we should start an electro pop band about climate change. What do you think, Rachel?
Maybe not with your voice. Finlay, what about me and you?
Aye, only if I was singing Gaelic, man. You can't speak Gaelic, mind. So maybe not. Well, I have to think of something else.
Low blow.
I have to think of something else.
Low blow.
Well, Not that long ago, I spent the day up in Allerdale, a 23,000 acre estate in the Highlands of Scotland, where I spoke to them about all things rewilding. Four years ago, I was here planting trees, but now I'm back in Allerdale Wilderness Reserve to talk about rewilding. So, can you define rewilding for us?
So, for me, rewilding is about regenerating the land, really. A lot of people think that it's about trying to reverse time and go back to some kind of archaic past, but for me, it's more about looking forward and looking at what kind of land Scotland could look like in the future, and trying to restore some of the damage that we've caused to the landscape here, and trying to basically regenerate it and let it recover. But it's not just about rewilding the land. I think it's also about rewilding people, and people being able to reconnect with our landscape and our nature and our wildlife, and trying to build that bridge again that I think has kind of been broken down in recent years, really. If you drive or walk through Scottish landscapes, they look pretty dramatic, but when you look a bit closer, you realise that they're actually quite barren. There's not very much there. So regenerating the land is actually one of the most important parts, is getting the trees back. You know, Scotland used to be covered in forests, and lots of temperate forests, broadleaf forests, and then also your pine forest further up. Nowadays, across much of Scotland, it's just heather.
What are the main benefits of rewilding?
So at the moment, some of the more traditional ways of managing Scottish landscapes are becoming less popular, and through that, landowners and people in rural communities who work on the land are in the future going to struggle to be able to maintain their way of life and to be able to make a living, and for those areas to be economically sustainable. I see rewilding as a way for us to have a future for rural communities in Scotland, to be able to have basically money coming in, and have, through using ecotourism and wildlife tourism, which are becoming more and more popular, we can actually create a financially and economically sustainable rural community within Scotland. So that's the benefit to people, just in terms of economy. The other benefit to people is actually through our mental health as well, having better diversity in the area and more stable ecological systems. And we can connect people back into nature more that way, and through getting them out on the land and seeing the wildlife that we have here, I think that can benefit people massively, really.
Where's
the badger hide? So it's along the other glen. Okay, it's about halfway along Glen.
You were along that one. Along this one.
You were along that one. Okay. And badger hide's a pretty cool thing to go see. Yeah. So it's about halfway along here. It would take you about 25 minutes to get along there.
Speaking to Annie Armstrong, you'd think, what was the problem with that? But in actual fact, rewilding is a very controversial topic. Previous landowners liked the land how it was, with fish, grouse and deer. As one person told us, the land was valued on how much death it could produce. This is the badger hide. This is where people come to look at wildlife on Allerdale. Land in Allerdale is now valued in natural capital. How many trees there are, how healthy the trees are, and also how many animals there are, such as squirrels and deer. Talking with people who work the land, it's not about getting rid of the deer on it. it's about improving on what we have now. People talk as if it's the second clearances, throwing people off and replacing them with bears and wolves. The truth is, it's not. Beavers, wildcats and reforestation come first, but the end goal is to have a sustainable relationship with the land and everything that lives on it.
So it's really great seeing you out there and talking about rewilding, because I feel like it isn't spoken about enough. Like, a lot of people don't actually know about it and just think of the basic things when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, definitely. It is overlooked, and it's definitely got a huge part to play, especially in Scotland. And but another thing with rewilding is rewilding's kind of a buzzword, and as soon as you say rewilding, folk are like, oh no, rewilding, apex predators, that's bad. And it's very much not that. When we were speaking to the workers on the estate of Allerdale, they were elaborating on kind of what they do, and it's more about just kind of creating a healthy ecosystem. And at the moment, it's very much an unhealthy ecosystem that's kind of all across Scotland. And as I said, it's a buzzword. And when you say rewilding, people think apex predators, wolves, and stuff like that. And public perception is very important, but at the moment it's against rewilding. And there was a great example of that with beavers. So when beavers were reintroduced, people were not happy with it because they thought beavers ate fish, and that's completely not true. Beavers are not carnivores, they don't eat meat at all, and they're actually hugely beneficial to the environment and the ecosystem around them. So yeah, public perception is a huge thing, and it's about getting people on board with rewilding.
Yeah, I definitely think that people, when you say you're going to bring animals back into the ecosystem, that you're just going to go straight for the big, like, apex predators, but people forget the smaller animals also contribute to the ecosystem massively.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all about just kind of gradually going into it, and it does start with the really small things like planting trees. So, funnily enough, I was in Allerdale a couple of years before on a trip with a school, and at the end we got to plant trees, and it was part of a project they bring in schools over the summer period, and they all planted trees. And when I went back, I went to see my trees, and they hadn't grown that much, unfortunately. But it was nice to see. It was nice to see the trees and all the other trees that had been planted and kind of the progress that's been made. So yeah, it is all about taking small steps and just kind of gradually building towards that kind of healthier ecosystem. That is the end goal.
How long does it take to really see results with rewilding?
A very long time, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't have a definitive answer for you. Like, as I said, the trees hadn't grown that much, and it was only a small section of the land that had actually been replanted.
But it is worth it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was lovely to go back up and see.
The scenery looked absolutely beautiful.
It was very nice.
But then obviously we're seeing them large scale with obviously the reforestation. But another thing that's happening in the communities is that in Glasgow there are regeneration projects that are bringing communities together to plan, and it helps them with their mental health. So let's have a look at that.
Today we're at Springburn Winter Gardens, which was once the largest glassworks in Scotland. It held lots of tropical plants throughout the winter time, but in recent years it's been left to rot away. But thanks to a local group, there's new plans to modernise this area and use it in a sustainable way. So we're going to take it over to them now.
I'm the coordinator for Springburn Winter Gardens Trust, and every year we participate in Doors Open weekend.
This place is not normally the cleanest, so we're just here to pick everything up and make it look nicer.
So why do you think it's important for young people especially to get out and do their part for the environment?
I mean, I think it's important for anyone, no matter what the age in the community, to get involved. The environment's so important.
I think it's very important
for us to keep the earth clean, like generally. It doesn't matter where we're doing it. Because I'm from India and I'm volunteering in Glasgow, and I don't think that really matters, because at the end of the day we still have to keep our planet clean.
Today we're doing a clean up of this rockery area, so all these volunteers have helped us do this massive clean up.
Yeah, so through my work I use bioplastics. So most plastics use petroleum based, which causes a lot of damage. It's an oil based plastic. So my bioplastics are completely sustainable, organic, natural, and they will biodegrade over time.
We then spoke to Paul Sweeney to ask him what's really important about preserving the past and how we can use it for a better future.
I was like, what on earth is this huge skeletal frame? I actually thought it was like a crashed airship or something like that, some ridiculous sort of relic from a bygone era. But it actually was an amazing winter gardens that was used to grow tropical plants. And it was built by a Victorian philanthropist and industrialist called James Reed. Since 2013, the Springburn Winter Gardens Trust, which I've been involved with, have been working to raise over £500,000 to restore this building, and we've already done significant work to actually prop up the steelwork and to save it from collapse.
One thing I had to ask though is, why are they so focused on preserving this local piece of history and what it really means to them?
I think it's a big part of our identity, so it's a part of Glasgow's history. It's about how our city evolved. It's a part of feeling pride in something, you know, a collective achievement.
This has the potential to be a community space, but make a sustainable community whilst we do that as well.
The history of the Winter Gardens is really the history of Glasgow.
Also potentially having a wind turbine in the park, and also the main water supply for the whole north of Glasgow comes right through this park. There's a huge reservoir in the park, so potentially using that to create a hydroelectric scheme for the whole north of Glasgow as well.
This building in Glasgow as a whole are really symbolic of what changes need to be made and how this rich industrial area is working towards being a greener place.
My name's Kenny McCubbin, Project Coordinator for Shettleston Community Grown Project. Shettleston Community Grown Project is in its 10th year anniversary this year. So the project exists to teach local people how to grow, how to look after and how to cook their own fresh fruit and vegetables.
There's been a lot of community involvement then. Do you think you've seen over the 10 years of the project an increase in that?
Over the 10 years it's massively increased. The project only started out in one phase, which was given to the project by Shettleston Housing Association, and then we realised quickly that there was a need for more space, so we then contacted Glasgow City Council, and then they then gave us another space for food growing as well. So over the years it's really expanded. Lots more people using it. I think it's the youngsters of today that will decide ultimately what's going to happen with the world going forward. Leaders are going to make decisions, but it's going to be the young people that are growing up today that are going to make sure that they keep to their promises.
So today at Shettleston Community Garden we learned that not only is this project teaching members of the community how to plant and cook their own food, it's also bringing generations together, and it's had a major positive effect on people's mental health during COVID.
It's great to see communities coming together and the positive effects it has on people's mental health.
Yeah, I definitely think it's surprising the fact that a lot of people might not realise that these other projects, which yes are based, say, in combating climate change, can have a positive effect on so many other areas. Say even in these projects, I mean, they've brought together the community, it's improved people's mental health, but it's also given them a purpose and given them a reason to really get out and explore their own natural environments and kind of get to know their own local areas, especially after COVID.
So coming up tomorrow, we're going to see Little Mal, interviews with activists who've travelled from South America to be here, and big names like Chris Packham. We've been COPTV, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.